Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will be analyzing the important news appearing in the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 19th July 2020. The topics to be discussed today are reflected on your screen and you know where to find the timestamping. So let's start. Now we have taken this news from page number 10 and it is titled Levy on Digital Services is Ambiguous, says tax experts. In discussion of this article today, we will be talking about the digital tax, also known as the Equalisation Levy, and sometimes colloquially referred to as the Google tax. Now, a number of countries across the world, such as Brazil, the Czech Republic, the European Union, France, and even India, have imposed digital taxes on various internet-based non-resident companies such as Amazon, Google, Facebook, etc. However, the United States of America, from where majority of these e-commerce platforms originate, feels that such taxes are basically being targeted towards American companies. And hence recently, USA has started investigations into imposition of such digital taxes on such companies by various countries. Hence, in this backdrop today, we will be talking about firstly the need to impose digital taxes, secondly what is equalization levy, third the expansion of this equalization levy, and fourth concerns raised with respect to recent changes. Now, as far as the rationale of imposing such a levy is concerned, you have to understand that the existing tax norms in our country, when they were framed keeping in mind the basic brick and mortar business model. That is to say, these tax norms basically cater to the taxation needs of physical shops and marketplaces. However, these current taxation norms are unable to regulate these online services. Furthermore, with the rapid advancement in the field of big data and artificial intelligence, the digital companies have been able to harness user-generated data. And this data is now enabling all these digital companies to earn huge revenue through these digital advertisements. And in spite of the fact that these companies earn revenues by harnessing the data generated in a particular country, for example, in this case, India, these companies are not basically obliged to pay adequate amount of taxes in the source country. So even though Google, Facebook, Amazon are earning huge amount of revenue from India, however, as per our current tax structure, these digital companies are not paying an adequate or to some extent, if we can say, proportionate taxes to the source country, in this case India. Hence, it was in this backdrop that the government introduced in the Union Budget of 2016 the Equalization Levy, whose purpose was to bring such internet-based companies within the ambit of taxation. Now, as I mentioned, the Equalization Levy was first introduced in the budget of the year 2016. Now, if I have to simplify and tell you what is an Equalization Levy, now currently a 6% Equalization Levy is applicable on any payment exceeding 1 lakh rupees per year by any Indian resident to a non-resident online service provider. Now, this online service provider can be an online vendor or any e-commerce platform. And the 6% will be charged on any income accruing to this non-resident online company for providing the Indian resident with any online advertisement services or by providing them some digital space for advertisement only. So now, in simple words, any non-resident online service provider, the basic idea is that any kind of online or a e-commerce platform who has a huge local client base in India, however not a tangible physical presence in India, will have to forego 6% of the income which is accrued to them if that income is above 1 lakh per year. Now let's understand this with help of an example that will clarify things. Now let's say there is this Indian brand XYZ. Okay, the brand is an Indian resident. That is, it is physically present in India. It is registered in India. Now let's say this Indian company has availed certain online advertisement services from Amazon. So this company went to Amazon and said that please lend us your digital space so that we can advertise our products. And for taking this digital service and for taking this digital space from Amazon for advertisement, let's say this company is supposed to pay Amazon 2 lakh rupees a year. Now it is here on this 2 lakh rupees that a 6% equalization levy will be charged. However, what is to be noted here is that this 6% equalization levy is in the form of a direct tax which will be cut from the total payment which this Indian company has to make to this non-resident online platform. So let's say this XYZ had to pay 2 lakh rupees, but XYZ will cut 6% of this 2 lakh rupees, which will be what? 12,000 rupees. So what this Indian company will do is that while it is making payment to Amazon, it will only give Amazon 1,88,000 rupees. And this 12,000 rupees, this company will withhold, and then this 12k rupees will be given to the government of India. So technically this 6% this Indian company has to withhold and not give to Amazon, and then this 6% this Indian resident has to pay to government. So this is how an equalization levy actually functions. So technically if you see, it is not the non-resident online service provider which is paying the government. It is actually the Indian company which is supposed to deposit this 6%. However, this 6% is being deducted from the income which was accruing to this non-resident online service provider. So in practicality, it is this e-commerce platforms from whose income 6% is being deducted. Other thing you need to note is that this equalization levy was only for the advertisement services and not for availing any other service. Hence, this 6% equalization levy was only applicable for a B2B business model, because logically also it is only a business company which would want to advertise. A customer as it is would not want to avail advertisement services of any e-commerce platform. Continuing further, in the budget of 2020 and then through the Finance Act of 2020, the government has inserted a provision where there has been an expansion of the equalization levy. So now the government is imposing an additional 2% equalization levy on the total revenue which is generated by these non-resident e-commerce platforms through online sale of goods and services if their total revenue is more than 2 crores a year. Here again, two things you need to remember. First is that it is an additional levy. So please do not think that this 2% has replaced the earlier 6%. No, the earlier 6% is still applicable. So the earlier 6% was only for the online advertisement service. However, this additional 2% is not for any specific services as such, and it will be charged on the total revenue generated through the online sale of goods and provisions of service. And it is this new modification which has been introduced in the Finance Act that has been opposed by the foreign e-commerce companies on account of certain reasons. So let us look at those reasons as well. Just one thing before some of you ask me that what exactly we mean by physical presence. By physical presence, I do not mean that they are not at all present in India. Of course, Google and Amazon have their own regional offices in India. By physical presence, I meant more of a permanent establishment nature. So these companies are permanently established in US and they are not permanent resident of India. So this is what I mean that they do not have a tangible physical presence. That is, they do not have a permanent establishment in India. Before proceeding further, please remember that here this new 2% equalization levy, this is to be paid by the non-resident e-commerce platform or online service provider. The first reason is the wider application of the taxation regime. Now, like we studied earlier the levy was only on advertisement revenue. That is the online advertisement service which these non-resident e-commerce platforms were providing. However, now the levy will be on all revenue generated through the sale of goods and service. Hence, effectively, what will happen is that this move all foreign-based technology companies in the ambit. This will not only include e-commerce companies like Amazon and Google. However, even content service providers or the online service providers or the online streaming platforms such as your Netflix or Amazon Prime, they too will come under this ambit. And it is here that the second problem arises. The second problem is of lack of distinction between digital services and the goods and services which are being provided through a digital mode. Now understand here, if you're watching a movie on Netflix or let's say Amazon Prime, then that is a digital service because Netflix or Amazon Prime is providing you with the digital content service. However, on the other hand, let us take the example where you are booking hotel tickets through Trivago, or let's say you are booking movie tickets through Book My Show. Now, though Book My Show is an Indian company, I'm just trying to give you an example here. So, if you are booking hotel, or let's say you are booking a movie ticket through a digital platform, here this digital platform of Trivago or Book My Show is acting as a digital medium as a mode of delivery for that good or service. So if you're booking a movie ticket through an online platform and then you're going and watching that movie in a multiplex, then it cannot be considered as completely a digital service. Because here Book My Show is not providing you movie as a digital service. It is only acting as a digital medium so that a certain good and service can be delivered to you. Hence, such booking platforms are quite distinct from streaming services such as Netflix and Amazon Prime. Therefore, accordingly, some of the companies have pointed out that it will be unfair to tax these digital medium companies equally and on par with these digital service providing companies. So, even though the government's idea is to tax e-commerce transaction, but essentially the government may end up taxing even those transactions where internet is just acting as a medium. Third and the last issue is of a higher tax burden. So like I stated earlier, the tax was only applicable on B2B business transactions. However, now this 2% equalization levy will be applicable on all and every transaction generating revenue. So though it hasn't been specified anywhere as such, but of course, very logically, it will include your B2B, your B2C, and every other kind of transaction as well. Hence, these are certain reservations these online platforms have as far as the 2% equalization levy is concerned. Now, this topic was important from the perspective of economy, both for mains and pre. However, it is very important for your pre, and it is quite likely that a question can be asked on equalization levy this year. So, with this, let's take up our next news. Now, this next news appears on page number 12, titled Psoriasis Drug in COVID-19 Therapy. Now, on 11th July, the pharma major Biocon announced that it has received the approval of the DCGI, that is the Drug Controller General of India, to market a drug called itolizumab for the treatment of cytokine release storm. Hence, our discussion today will primarily focus on what is this itolizumab and what exactly is a cytokine storm. But to understand these two, we first need to understand a certain trend or a certain fact related to COVID-19. Now, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, almost 80% of the patients show somewhere mild to moderate symptoms and recover within a few days and just have simple symptoms like cough and fever. However, many a times there are about 10% of patients who have very severe symptoms of this disease irrespective of their age or medical history. So the question is, what is the reason behind this 10% severe case? Because for long we were saying that coronavirus is more harmful if there exists certain kind of comorbidity. To simply say comorbidity means that there is some underlying medical condition as well, which makes the treatment of COVID-19 more difficult and makes a person more susceptible to fatality. So for example, let's say if a person has sugar or diabetes or some underlying conditions like TB, malaria, tuberculosis or anything. So if a person has comorbidity, then of course it is considered that if such a person is infected by coronavirus, their condition will be far more severe than a person who doesn't have any kind of underlying medical problem. However, for these 10%, what we have been noticing is that these 10% are healthy people, irrespective of whether they are 60-year-old or whether they are 20-year-old. These people without any kind of comorbidity somehow develop very severe case of COVID-19. Now, though the experts are not sure why, but what they have observed is that many of the victims who died due to such severe COVID-19 were also victims of what is known as a cytokine storm. Cytokine storm medically is known as cytokine release syndrome. Let us now see what is a cytokine storm. So basically, cytokines are small proteins which are released by millions of cells in our body, including the immune cells. Now we know that the immune system in our bodies protect us from various kind of pathogens such as bacteria, viruses, parasites, etc. Now the immune system gets activated by things that the body does not recognize as its own, and these things are called as antigens. And to fight these antigens, the body produces antibodies. Now, an effective immune system response involves inflammation. Now, inflammation is a very important process of immune response. So, you would have also noticed inflammation when a person hurts their knee or ankle. The area of the external injury becomes red and swollen. So, this inflammation is important because then the immune system deploys more white blood cells to this injured area and begin work on the repair. And without such an immune response involving these cytokines, injuries would not heal. Now these cytokines are inflammation causing proteins. Therefore these cytokines help trigger inflammation, and then they increase the blood flow to that area, which allows larger number of immune cells to be carried to the injured tissue. However, the problem here is that if this inflammation response is not regulated, it can lead to a very dangerous result, which is known as a cytokine storm. So, cytokine storm is nothing but a condition in which the cytokines increase in number, and this in turn leads to hyperinflammation. Now, as far as the reason as to why a cytokine storm occurs, a cytokine storm can occur due to an infection where the body is faced with some new kind of virus and the body is unable to gauge as to how much of cytokine or immune cell production is required to fight off that disease. Now, as far as the case of COVID-19 is concerned, when the SARS-CoV-2 virus enters the lungs, it triggers an immune response. And this attracts the immune cells to the region to attack the virus. And this attracting of the immune cells to the region, that is the lungs, to attack the virus, results in localized inflammation. That is that area of the lungs where the virus has attacked, that area becomes inflamed. However, in some patients, excessive or uncontrolled levels of cytokines are released, which then activate more number of immune cells, and then they lead to what is known as hyperinflammation. And it is this hyperinflammation which is very dangerous and can even kill the patient. Now, cytokine storms are a common complication of not only COVID-19, but even for most of the respiratory diseases such as SARS and MERS. And it is this cytokine storm, which is nothing but an overdrive immune response, which explains as to why some people have severe reaction to coronavirus while others only experience mild symptoms. Hence, a challenge in the treatment of COVID-19 is how to prevent this overreaction or this overdrive immune response due to excessive release of the cytokines. Now, experts say that one method to counter this cytokine storm is to use antibodies that can block a particular protein. And experts say if this protein is suppressed, then it will prevent the T cells, which are basically your immune cells, from releasing a cytokine cascade. However, as you must be knowing that in the case of COVID-19, there are no proven drugs to treat moderate or severe manifestation of the disease. So one way to tackle this cytokine storm is through convalescent plasma therapy. However, the problem with this convalescent plasma therapy is that it involves injecting the entire antibody soup, that is the entire plasma, into another sick patient. So hence the doctors or the researchers thought, what if we can derive a monoclonal antibody by separating or isolating specific antibodies and then multiply them via various techniques? Because isolating plasma and serum in the laboratories and then injecting it into a sick patient is very time consuming, especially considering the fact that a lot of patients do not have a lot of time in their hands. So if you want to know more about convalescent plasma therapy, you can refer to the DNS dated 10th April where Mangal sir has discussed this quite beautifully. Now coming to what is monoclonal antibody. So this drug which I was referring to, itolizumab, is basically a monoclonal antibody. Now monoclonal antibodies are again proteins which are cloned in the lab, and these proteins basically mimic certain kind of antibodies produced by the immune system to counter an infection. So please remember that monoclonal antibody is not exactly an antibody, it is basically a protein which is made to mimic antibodies produced by the immune system. And these monoclonal antibodies are made by isolating a specific antibody which is required to fight a particular disease, in this case COVID-19. Now these proteins basically bind to an antigen, in this case it is the SARS-CoV-2, and then either they destroy it or block the action of this particular virus. And this monoclonal antibody is also derived from the serum, which is the colorless constituent of the blood that contains antibodies. Now this itolizumab is basically an approved drug for acute psoriasis, and it has passed safety and efficacy trials for this disease in over 500 patients. Now though independent experts say that the potential or the success rate of this itolizumab in treating COVID-19 caused acute respiratory disease has not been conclusively demonstrated. However, this drug has been approved by the DCGI for emergency use in the treatment of moderate to severely ill patients as per the discretion of the physicians. So this was all about this article. Please remember what exactly is a cytokine storm, what are cytokines, and then remember what is a monoclonal antibody, and remember the name of this drug, that is the itolizumab. So this was all about this article. With this, let's take up our next news. Now this next news too has been taken from page number 12, titled "What is plea bargaining and how does it work?" Now the context is that recently many members of the Tablighi Jamaat belonging to different countries released and obtained from the court cases by means of plea bargaining. Now these people were accused of violating the visa conditions by attending a religious congregation in Delhi. And now these foreign nationals have walked free after pleading guilty for the minor offences with which they were charged and by paying fines imposed by the court. Hence all these cases have brought the focus on plea bargaining as a practice. And in this regard, today we will be talking about plea bargaining. Now what is plea bargaining? To simply put, in a pre-trial stage, that is, the person has been charged with certain offence, however the trial for that offence has not started. So in such a pre-trial stage, if the victim, the accused and the prosecution, all three of them agree, then upon that agreement, the accused himself pleads guilty in return for a lenient sentence or a charge. So plea bargaining basically means that a person who has been charged with a criminal offense negotiates with the prosecution for a lesser punishment by pleading guilty. So let's say X has been charged with an offense of ABC. Now usually X will have to wait for his trial to start, and the trial too will be a long drawn process and it might take years. In fact, 2 out of every 3 prisoner in our Indian jail is an under trial. Under trials are basically all those people who have been charged, however, whose trials have not yet started or the trials are going on. Such people are known as under trials, and 2 out of every 3 prisoner is an under trial. In fact, the irony is many a time such prisoners stay inside the prison longer than what was the maximum prescribed punishment for the offense they were charged with. Therefore, it was such high pendency of cases and the high number of under trials which nudged the Indian government to come out with the concept, not come out, but to rather accept and incorporate the concept of plea bargaining in our criminal justice system. Now, this pre-trial bargaining is very common in the United States, and in fact, it has been a very successful method of avoiding a long drawn and complicated trials. Now, let's see how plea bargaining originated in India. Now, please note that plea bargaining was introduced in India only in 2006. Some places you will see 2005, but in 2005 we had the amendment. Practically, it was started in the year 2006. Now, before 2006 also, there was always a provision in the CRPC that an accused can plead guilty instead of going to the court and going for a trial. However, this is not same as plea bargaining, because in plea bargaining you are negotiating to reduce your sentence. You are saying that okay, I am saying that I am guilty, so since I am voluntarily accepting my guilt and my mistake, so you please reduce my sentence or my charge. Then next, various law commissions have been associated with plea bargaining. The 142nd Law Commission also spoke about the idea of concessional treatment or a kind of plea bargaining. However, it was the 154th Law Commission which finally said that we should go ahead with plea bargaining at least as a small experiment. And then I guess it was the 177th Law Commission which finally said that we need to bring in the amendments to our CRPC to incorporate plea bargaining. You do not need to mug up the number of these Law Commission report. Just keep them in mind if you can. And then finally in 2005 the CRPC was amended and new sections 265A to 265L were added. Again, you do not need to remember the sections. Now, though plea bargaining is now allowed in India, however, the question is plea bargaining allowed for all kind of offences? So if that's the case, I can commit murder tomorrow and then I can say, oh, I did a mistake, please forgive me and reduce my sentence. Of course not. You cannot do that, right? Then what is the purpose of the entire criminal justice system? Now, though plea bargaining is allowed across a variety of criminal cases, now please remember it is only for criminal cases, it is not for civil cases. Because in a criminal case, the state is a party. However, a civil case is a one where the two people can sort out their differences themselves and of course can settle the matter through arbitration, conciliation or even outside the court. Now, there are 4 major circumstances or instances where plea bargaining is not allowed. First case is that if a person is charged with an offense whose punishment is prescribed as death, life sentence or more than 7 years of prison, then such a person is not eligible. So the first point you have to keep in mind is that plea bargaining can only be availed for offences for whose maximum punishment is only up to 7 years. Second, any kind of offence which affects the socio-economic condition of our country, for such offences too, there is no plea bargaining available. Thirdly, offences against women, no plea bargaining is available. And lastly, offence against any children below the age of 14 years, there too no kind of plea bargaining is available. So please keep these 4 instances in mind. These can be important if a question in prelims is asked. Next, as far as the procedure is concerned, just remember 2-3 things here. It is very technical and it is not important as far as your GS is concerned. If you have law optional, then of course you can look into this topic in more detail. Now in India, it is the accused who initiates a plea bargain, and then the accused has to apply to the court to invoke the benefits of bargaining. Now this is different from United States because in US, the prosecutor plays a key role in bargaining with the offender. So if you have seen a lot of detective series on Netflix or Amazon Prime, you will always see, especially in US based drama, that the prosecutor comes to the accused and say that we are offering you a deal if you give us some information, something like that. So there the prosecutor too can initiate a plea bargain. However, in India only the accused can do so, and that too willingly. So this willingly point is important. How? We will see in the next 2 minutes. Now basically the applicant has to approach the court with a petition and the affidavit stating that it is his voluntary decision that he wants to plea bargain and that he has understood the nature and extent of punishment. Now the court would then issue a notice to the prosecutor and the victim, if at all any, for hearing. Then after the court has ascertained that the application has indeed been made voluntary, the court will permit the prosecutor, the investigating officer as well as the victim to hold a meeting to satisfactorily dispose of this case. Now this mutual decision might involve that the accused has to pay certain compensation to the victim or other expenses to the victim, or somehow they all will mutually agree that we will reduce the sentence or the charge, so on and so forth. That is technical. Now usually the accused may be sentenced to a term which is half the minimum term prescribed in the IPC or in any other criminal law. So let's say the offence he was charged with had minimum punishment of 2 years and maximum of 7 years. So then the accused person's sentence can be reduced to 1 year, which is half the minimum of 2. And if at all no minimum term is prescribed, then the accused will be sentenced to a term which is 1/4 of the maximum punishment. Now, as far as your mains are concerned, the next 3 aspects become important. First is the question that if we have plea bargaining ever since, let's say 2006, why has this idea not yet taken off in India? Now, the 2016 NCRB statistics tell us that only 0.45% of the cases were disposed of through plea bargaining mechanism. Now, though the exact reason is not really clear, however, lack of awareness on the part of the accused, considering the fact that it is the accused who has to go and initiate a plea trial petition, and even the fact that it is not available for all the cases can be the 2 major reasons as to why it has not taken off. However, regardless of the fact that plea bargaining is not popular in India, plea bargaining is something that we desperately do require in India. As I stated, 2 out of every 3 prisoner is an under trial and they are just languishing away in the prisons, and in fact some of them for very petty offences as well. Now coming on to the advantages of plea bargaining. Now this can be asked, you can use if at all a question is asking you to critically analyze the concept of plea bargaining. The first advantage of the plea bargaining is that it removes the uncertainty from the legal process. Because since you are going and saying that yes, I am guilty, you are then very sure that you are going to be convicted for that offence. So that mental agony and that uncertainty, what the court will say, whether I'll be held guilty, whether I'll be convicted, whether I'll be released, a person can, save himself from all of that things, especially if the person is actually guilty. Second is that it can be a good negotiating tool in the hand of the accused. Third, it will help to reduce the number of inmates or under trials in our jails. As you must be knowing, our jails or prisons are highly overpopulated. So of course plea bargain will be a move in the right direction. Next, of course, is the very obvious advantage is that it will help to reduce sentence and the charge. And in a way, it will also help to avoid any kind of publicity or hassles is concerned. Next, for the disadvantages, the first disadvantage is that the accused will have a criminal record on his name. Now, even though the accused is getting less sentence, however, he will not be acquitted of that charge or offense. Now, what happens is that, let's say if I go for a proper trial, if there is lack of evidence or some other reason or some other situation, there might be a slight possibility that even if I am guilty, I might just get to walk scot free. For some or the other reason, I might not be convicted for that offense. However, if I go in for plea bargaining, then since I am myself accepting that I am guilty, I definitely will have a criminal record to my name. And even if I am innocent, I'll still be considered as a criminal. Second disadvantage is that no appeal is allowed as far as plea bargaining is concerned. Now, usually in a normal trial, if at all a lower court says if at all a lower court convicts you for an offense and gives you a certain amount of punishment, you always have the option to appeal to the higher court. However, in the case of plea bargaining, the option of appeal is totally removed. You cannot appeal to a plea bargaining decision which has been made final by the court. The only exception is that you can move to the higher court under special leave petition. Then some people say that plea bargaining is a kind of softer justice for guilty people. Because in many circumstances, a plea bargain provides lighter sentence for someone even if they may be guilty. So a lot of people say that it can be treated as an escape route for an accused person. In fact, some people also say that a guilty plea and a lesser sentence is not the same as being found guilty by the court and having been given the accurate sentence which is provided for. Last and the major disadvantage, which actually should have been the first one, is that especially in a country like India, since plea bargaining has to be voluntary, that is, the accused should be asking for plea bargain on his own volition, this is not the case. Many a times the accused is coerced by, let's say, the victim or by the prosecutor or whosoever to go and say that yes, I am guilty. And it is usually the poor people or the marginalized people from the society, people who cannot afford the money for the bail or who do not have the resources to go and fight in the court, are the ones who actually accept that they are guilty even if they are not guilty. So these are some of the disadvantages of plea bargaining. So as far as your exam is concerned, both for the prelims and for the mains, these points and whatever we discussed should be enough. Now, based on a discussion, you can try to attempt this question. This question will, in all probability, fall under GS paper 2. And try to discuss this in 250 words. With this, let's take up our next news. Now, this news has been taken from page number 8, titled Government Opens Up NDRF for Individual Donations. Now, finally, the Government of India has come out with the modalities which will make it possible for any individual or even institutions for that matter to contribute funds for the National Disaster Response Fund as per the provisions given under Section 46(1)(b) of the Disaster Management Act. Now, the provision under this Section 46 was hitherto unused. So, this provision was always there, but the government did not, for a lack of better word, activate this provision. But now the government has come out with the modalities as to how it can be used. In this regard, let us talk very quickly about the NDRF. Now, the NDRF has been set up under the Disaster Management Act of 2005. Hence, it is a statutory fund. Now, under the Disaster Management Act, two funds have been set. One is the NDRF, which is at the national level, and then we have State Disaster Response Fund at the state level to meet the rescue and relief expenditure during any notified disaster. Notified disaster would include your earthquake, heat wave, avalanches, forest fire, etc. Now, please remember that the NDRF is funded entirely by the central government through the imposition of National Calamity Contingency Duty on certain luxury goods such as cigarettes and even on the petroleum. Now, NDRF is maintained under the Public Account of India. Now, as far as the SDRF is concerned, 75% of the funds are provided by the centre and the remaining 25% of the funds are provided by the concerned state government. Now, here please note that in the year 2018, there was a notification, or rather a decision by the cabinet, that the centre will now fund 90% of the SDRF funds. However, now when we were researching, in fact we even looked through PIB, all the newspapers including Hindu, Indian Express and even PIB for that matter, in the last 2-3 months, whatever notification they have released with respect to SDRF, there they are mentioning that 75% of the funds are provided by the centre and the remaining 25% by the state. So since the latest PIB circulars are saying so, we will be taking this number. Other thing, if you will look at the circular which was published in 2018, there it was saying that for the year 2018-19 and 19-20, the central government will pay 90%. So maybe that provision was only for 2 years. Honestly speaking, I am not sure. There is not clarity. But however, since the latest PIB also says 75% of the funds, let us go with it. Please excuse the barking of the dog in the background. Furthermore, how much funds are to be allocated to the states annually, that is based on the recommendation of the successive finance commission. Now please note that NDRF is used to supplement SDRF. However, the state governments have to submit utilization certificates, and if they do not submit this utilization certificate, no future allocation is made. Another important point here is that the funds from the SDRF or the NDRF can only be used to provide immediate relief, and they cannot be used for paying any kind of compensation for loss or damage. So this was all about the NDRF. With this, let's take up our next news. Now moving on to the news summary, the first is about Malabar drill. Now the Malabar exercise was first established in the year 1992 as a bilateral naval exercise between India and the United States. However, it became an annual feature only after 2002. Now in the year 2007, the scope of this Malabar exercise was enhanced, and other 3 nations, that is Japan, Australia and Singapore, were also taken aboard in this multilateral naval exercise. However, this display of multilateral naval cooperation heightened China's anxiety, and then both India and USA, to allay China's concern, made the Malabar into a bilateral exercise again. Now in the year 2015, Japan joined Malabar exercise as a permanent member, and now the government is thinking that Australia should join this naval war games of Malabar. Now Malabar exercise is important because it enhances India's credibility in maritime domain, and all the collective efforts on the part of the various countries will help to secure the 3 global commons of ocean space and cyberspace. The second news is with respect to the KURMA app. Now, on the occasion of the World Turtle Day, an application called KURMA, which is aimed at turtle conservation, has been launched. Now, this application has been made by Indian Turtle Conservation Action Network in collaboration with the Turtle Survival Alliance India as well as the Wildlife Conservation Society of India. Now, this app not only helps us to identify the species of the turtle, but it also helps to give us the location of the nearest rescue center. Now, as per the report by Traffic in the year 2019, tortoise and freshwater turtles were the most trafficked animals in the country. The species of turtles found in India is concerned, 5 species are found, namely olive ridley, green turtle, loggerhead, hawksbill and leatherback. Now, out of all these 5, loggerhead, leatherback and olive ridley have been listed as vulnerable under the IUCN, whereas hawksbill is the only one listed as critically endangered and green turtle has been listed as endangered. Now all these 5 turtles are protected under the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act, and they are also being conserved under the Biodiversity Conservation and Ganga Regeneration Program. The third news is titled Warm Up, and it has been given as a snippet on page number 11. The Solar Orbiter mission, which is a joint mission of NASA and European Space Agency, has sent the first images of Sun from a distance of about half the Earth-Sun distance. Now the reason this is important is because this is the closest observation of the sun so far, and this observation can help to explain the sun's coronal heating. The solar orbiter mission will also be the first to provide images of the sun's pole, and this mission also aims to study the magnetic environment around the sun so that we can understand the sun's 11-year solar cycle and its periodic outpouring of solar storms. Now, since we are talking about solar missions, there are other two important solar missions as well. One is NASA's Parker Solar Probe. Now, this probe wants to gather information about sun's atmosphere. Parker Solar Probe is the closest a human-made object has ever gone to the sun. This mission also wants to study the sun's corona and understand what is the source of sun's solar wind. Now, as far as India is concerned, India's first mission to study the sun, Aditya L1, will be launched in early 2020, but now due to COVID-19, it has been delayed. And the aim of this mission is to study the solar corona. And now, as you must be knowing, corona is the outermost region of sun's atmosphere. However, the corona has temperature higher than what is found on the surface of the sun. And the reason for this is still unknown, and this is what Aditya L1 aims to do. With this, we come to an end for today's discussion. Let's take up the question for the day.